welcome to the International Desk. I'm Lynda Kinkade. We start with rising international tensions and new domestic challenges facing Donald Trump. The US president still hasn't signed a Russian sanctions bill, which was overwhelmingly passed by Congress as new revelations surface in the Russian meddling investigation. CNN is learning today that Mr. Trump is getting ready to take on China over what he calls unfair trade practices by Beijing, and over what he sees as its failure to not put enough pressure on North Korea over its nuclear program. In Washington, the strong Republican support Mr. Trump has enjoyed since the inauguration appears to be eroding on the key issue of health care. We'll cover all that and much more here at the iDesk. But first, the North Korean dilemma. There are mixed messages coming out of Washington over how to handle Kim Jong-un and North Korea's missile tests as the U.S. tests its own missile. That happened early Wednesday morning. The U.S. Air Force launched an ICBM from California, and its payload landed in the Pacific Ocean, about 7,000 kilometers away. An Air Force statement says the test was not related to recent North Korean actions. At his Monday cabinet meeting, Mr. Trump said the U.S. will handle North Korea. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said U.S. military options are inevitable if Kim Jong-un continues on his current path. But yesterday at the State Department, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson seemed to push for diplomacy. Take a listen.
We do not seek a regime change. We do not seek the collapse of the regime. We do not seek an accelerated reunification of the peninsula. We do not seek an excuse to send our military north of the 38th parallel. And we're trying to convey to the North Koreans, we are not your enemy. We're not your threat, but you are presenting an unacceptable threat to us, and we have to respond.
Well, I want to bring in our global affairs correspondent, Elisa Labbott. Elisa, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
Just days after North Korea tested its second intercontinental ballistic missile, the U.S. now launching its own. What can you tell us?
Well, U.S. officials are saying that it has nothing to do with the North Korean test and that this was long planned. But of course, Linda, you have to know that the U.S. is increasing its show of force to North Korea, not only in terms of deterrence psychologically, but also the U.S. really needs to make sure that its defenses are at the ready, especially as North Korea continues to develop its intercontinental ballistic missiles. But also it's a show of force to North Korea. I think that the U.S. is ready and able to continue to counter North Korean missiles.
Annalise, we're also seeing some pretty mixed messages from the White House when it comes to handling North Korea. The Secretary of State and the U.S. President seem to have different ideas. Donald Trump continuing to blame China, now looking to target their trade. What are you learning?
Well, we do know that President Trump is considering some trade measures against China. He's considering instructing the U.S. Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer, to initiate an investigation into what President Trump has called unfair Chinese trade practices. That could be anything from steel dumping to theft of American intellectual property. Now, you know that President Trump, during the campaign and when he came into office, has been talking about what he called unfair trade practices from China, but he was willing to give China some time and, you know, was a little bit reluctant to impose those measures to give China an opportunity to work more cooperatively on North Korea. And he pretty much said that himself. But now that he sees that China is not cooperating to put in sufficient pressure on North Korea, those missile tests continue, the missile development and nuclear development continues. President Trump said he's had enough, and now he is going to crack down on Chinese trade practices. So we could see an announcement this week. And if that investigation finds some violations, there could be tariffs on Chinese imports. There could be other trade measures.
All right, we'll have to see how that plays out. Elisa Labbott for us. Thank you very much. Well, Rex Tillerson heads to the Philippines this week for the ASEAN meeting, and that country's president is lashing out at Kim Jong-un. Listen to what Rodrigo Duterte had to say about the North Korean leader in Manila.
This Kim Jong-un is a fool. You know, if that guy, I do not think he is ready, but he is playing with dangerous toys, that crazy man. He has a chubby, kind-looking face, but son of a he's a maniac.
And there's a new element of concern to Kim Jong-un's missile program, potential danger to commercial jets. We've learned the latest North Korean missile test came within kilometres of an established flight path. Alexandra Field joins us now from Seoul. Alexandra, there were 332 people on board this Air France flight. We know North Korea never announces its tests, and so airlines don't really know what they could be flying into.
Right, they're flouting international agreements by failing to announce these tests, not to mention the fact that they are flouting international sanctions by even conducting these tests. So with all the concerns that these ICBM tests pose, not just for the region, but really for global security, these are things that the airlines do have to account for. What we saw happen with this last test was that the Japanese military identified the splashdown site as happening some 93 miles northwest of a Japanese island. If you compare that splash site to flight data on FlightAware.com, it appears that an Air France flight was about 100 kilometers away from that point at the time of splashdown. In flying time, Lynda, that's about 7 minutes. Also worth noting that, of course, this ICBM launch reached a much higher altitude than a commercial jet would be flying at. The airline has responded by saying that North Korea's missile test zones don't interfere with their flights. They're assuring the public that they constantly analyze potentially dangerous flyover zones and that they adapt their flight plans accordingly. That flight, of course, going off without any incident, as the airline is noting now, Lynda.
Right. But Alexander, it's not just those in the sky, also those at sea. I imagine cargo ships particularly would be pretty concerned when those missiles come down.
Right, you're talking about heavily trafficked waterways here. If you also look at the splashdown site of this missile, it's within about 16 kilometers of 2 airways that are heavily trafficked navigation routes. So yes, there's a lot of traffic in the sky. There's a lot of traffic in the water. The spokesperson for the Pentagon actually spoke out following this ICBM launch and the previous one, noting the dangers of this and again slamming North Korea for failing to give notice of these launches and potentially compromising those who are in the air and at sea. But really, Lynda, if we step back, how great of a risk does this present? Well, it's a legitimate cause for concern, but you also have to take into consideration the vast amount of space that you're looking at here in terms of the air and in terms of the sea. And a Pentagon spokesperson also pointed out that the probability, the likelihood of a potential problem remains very low. However, the actions from North Korea clearly contributing to a climate of concern because of the fact they're failing to give notice and leaving others to navigate around them.
Yeah, we were just looking, as you were talking, Alexander, at some real-time graphics of the flight path, planes in the area. Certainly a lot of traffic, both in the air and in the sea. Alexandra Field for us in Seoul. Thank you very much.